This video is going to look at the binary switch, how it works, what it does, why we put it in there, and in some cases, what if we didn't have it. Now, the unique thing about the binary switch is there's two functions in one. It's got a low pressure and a high pressure contact in one switch. Typically mounts to the high side, but we can use it on the low side as well, which I'll show you as we go along. Here's an ANSI drawing of the binary switch in its normal state, or as it would come out of a box before you thread it onto a system. Two contacts. Here's our low pressure contact. We can say really it will stay closed above 15 psi, but anything below 15 psi, it's going to open. On the other side is a high pressure contact, and it's going to stay closed as long as we are below 270 psi. Anything above 270, it's going to go open. This and this symbolize a pressure diaphragm, and of course the pressure diaphragm is pushing one way, and as always we have the spring pushing back the other. Whoever happens to be stronger wins the battle. And internally, between the two connections, there is another connection. Think of it as a piece of wire joining the two. Let's look at the switch if it were threaded onto a system that's running within its proper limits. Again, remembering that the binary switch usually threads onto the high side. So if we had 100 psi inside of that switch body, both contacts are going to be closed. The low pressure contact is happy because there's over 15 psi. The high pressure contact is happy because there's less than 270 psi. If we had 270 psi on the high side of the system because of some malfunction, the high pressure contact here is going to go open and protect that compressor and our system components from excessively high pressures. If, on the other hand, let's say a hose were to break and we have 0 psi in the system, now the low pressure contact goes to work and opens up and prevents that compressor from running. We're going to look at this binary switch in some different scenarios, starting with a TXV system in a high pressure condition. Most common cause, no airflow through the condenser. Now that could be because the condenser fan has failed, it could be because of an external blockage. Whatever the case, we need airflow through that condenser to get rid of the heat. If we can't get rid of the heat, the pressure is going to rise. Remembering back to the thermostatic switch over here, it has no idea about pressure. All it knows is the temperature of the evaporator. It sees a warm evaporator and it tells the compressor to keep pumping. But if we were to put a binary switch on the high side right here, we've got a high pressure contact that's going to go open at 270 psi and protect that compressor to stop it from pumping in an excess high pressure situation. Let's look at a low ambient temperature situation. Remembering again, there's always that relationship between pressure and temperature. So at an ambient temperature of about -24 Celsius, the system pressure is going to be 1.9 psi up here, and it will also be 1.9 psi on the high side. The whole system has done the cold soak overnight. If the driver is to turn on the defog, remember again that the air conditioning is going to try and come on. Now, the thermostatic switch at that point is going to be open because the evaporator is sitting at a very low temperature. If we put a binary switch on the high side, the low pressure contact is also going to be open because it's sensing something below 15 psi. Now there is a little extra safety factor here as well. Because the evaporator is sitting inside the cab, there is a chance that after the truck has been running for a while, the evaporator may warm up enough that the thermostatic switch would close the contacts and tell the compressor to run. That's okay because we've still got the binary switch sitting out here that's measuring the actual system pressure. And with all these external components sitting out in that minus 24 ambient temperature, there's no way we're going to build up enough pressure to have that binary switch close. Again, what was the problem with having an AC system running at minus 24? If I've got no heat, I can't vaporize the refrigerant. And if I can't vaporize the refrigerant, I can send liquid to the compressor and destroy the reed valves. Let's look at a no charge situation. And the no charge caused by the broken line right here. All the refrigerant escapes to atmosphere. We've got 0 psi on the high side and the low side. The thermostatic switch only knows that in this situation with an ambient temperature of 21 Celsius and a sunny day, all it would know is that the evaporator is warm and we need that compressor to pump. However, if we put a binary switch on the system, even on the high side, the low pressure contact is going to sense something less than 15 psi, and it will stop that compressor from pumping. Why do we care again? We don't ever want an AC compressor to come on with a broken hose because it will ingest dirt, moisture, and whatever else and destroy itself from contamination. Let's look at what would happen with a low charge system. Normally I want to see 10 to 40 on my low side and somewhere above 100 on my high side, say between 100 and 250. And because I'm low on refrigerant, I'm actually running at about 85 on the high side, and I'm down at about 1 on the low side. Now, if there were even less refrigerant in the system, it's possible that the low side could be running in a vacuum. What do we get for cooling? Almost nothing. We take air in with heat, we kick it out with heat. All the thermostat knows at that point is the evaporator temperature is too high, and it wants that compressor to keep pumping to try and get some cooling. Now here's the different part about all this. The low pressure contact on the binary switch will go open at 15 psi, but you have to look at where the binary switch is mounted. It's mounted on the high side, on the receiver dryer. It has no idea what is going on the low side. So in this case, the binary switch would not protect us from having a low charge situation. Hence, it's an all-in-one protection. It does a pretty good job for most things, but it can't protect from everything. However, there is a solution we'll look at on the next slide. What if we take that same low charge situation and we put another binary switch and we mount it over on the low side? Now, right here, we've just turned the switch upside down so it looks a little different, but in this case, that low pressure switch contact does know what's going on the low side, and when it sees anything less than 15 psi, it's going to go open. The high pressure contact here basically is redundant. There's really no need for it, but it's in there. It would just never ever go open. So we could potentially use a binary switch on a TXV system on the low side to give us that protection against a low charge. Let's look at one scenario now with a CCOT system. remembering the CCOT system always has the clutch cycling switch on the low side, which gives us all the protections that we need as far as low pressure goes. If you don't remember those, go back and watch the video about low pressure switch and the CCOT system. What we could do potentially is put a binary switch though on the high side, and in this case again we've got no airflow through the condenser, which is going to cause the heat to stay trapped in the system, which is going to cause the pressures to rise, most noticeably the high side, and in that case the high pressure contact will go open. The fact that we have a low pressure contact here really does become a redundant thing. It would probably never open in normal operation, but it's there. We would just be using the high pressure side. In summary, the binary switch has a low pressure and a high pressure contact built into one switch body. Now this switch can be used in different ways on either a CCOT or a TXV system and can be put on the high side or the low side. You have to understand the switch and you have to understand the system to be able to figure out what protection it will give you in every circumstance.